Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Real Abilities Film Festival. My name is Isaac Zablocki. I'm director and co-founder of Real Abilities. Thank you for joining us here today, and we're excited to host the conversation for The World is Bright. Coming up, just so you know, at 7 p.m. we have the conversation for In a Different Key, and then tomorrow night is our closing night. That's it. We're starting at 5 p.m. with Disgraced, a live reading of a screenplay comedy that's starring the fabulous. It's written by Julie Klausner, and it's starring Shannon DeVito. That's who you might have seen at opening night as part of Best Summer Ever. You just heard her singing, actually. Then our closing night film is Not Going Quietly, about Adi Barkan. He will be here with us. We'll also have Temple Grandin as a special guest, so please join us for that. Tell your friends, this is the last, 36 hours to see these films and help spread the word. Right now, I'm first of all extremely grateful to all of our partners who make Real Abilities possible, who help support Real Abilities. I want to thank Vimeo, who is our Q&A sponsor and has been supporting all of these conversations. Of course, I also want to thank the people who are doing the work on the ground in relation to these films specifically. So today, the Chinese American Family Alliance for Mental Health, Chinese Community Center, and NAMI NYC, NAMI NYC, who are doing work in the mental health world that very much relates to our film. NAMI actually connected us to the Chinese American chapter, who will be moderating this conversation. Of course, when we're in person, we get to have Real Abilities at many different locations. Since we are virtual, we have our locations co-present, and this conversation is being co-presented by DCTV, our good partners who hosted, I'm going to recall a few years ago, they hosted our comedy night, which we did here at the JCC last night. So I'm really proud to hand things over to Dara Messenger from DCTV.
Hi there. Thank you so much. My name's Dara Messenger. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm DCTV's Director of Programming and Engagement. We're a proud co-presenting partner in this new virtual world, but still just want to thank Real Abilities for having us and for doing all the work that you do, and also to Ying Wang for making such a beautiful film. Founded in 1972, DCTV is a renowned media center located in Manhattan's Chinatown in New York City, on the unceded land of the Lenape people, where we have community screenings, discussions, youth media, and continuing education programs all existing side by side with DCTV's own award-winning documentary productions. And so since the pandemic, we've brought our programs online, including filmmaking workshops and a virtual cinema. Coming up, we have a free virtual co-working event for documentary filmmakers this Thursday, May 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All are invited. Also, if you know any New York City high school students, we have our youth program is accepting applications for our summer media intensive this July. And their recent film, COVID Diaries NYC, premiered and is currently streaming on HBO with an impact campaign currently underway. So that's just a taste of some things that we have going on. So please join our email list, follow us on socials at DCTVNY to see all that we're up to and stay connected. I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Lynn An from Chinese American Family Alliance for Mental Health.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm going to drop in the chat. You'll learn a little bit more about our organization. Essentially, we are an organization, community organization that supports families. So when Isaac reached out, I was very excited about the film because it speaks to so many of the the family dynamics, the cultural piece, and also just the mental health system that our families deal with. So I am an anthropologist by training, and I teach Asian American studies at Hunter College, but I also do a lot of this community nonprofit work. And I just dropped our website in the chat. Feel free to check us out more. All our services are free and in Chinese. So I'm excited to introduce Ying Wang. Ying started out first as she's a writer and photographer in China, and she moved to Canada from Beijing in 1997, first as an international student and then became a landed immigrant. So as a migrant navigating between multiple cultures, Ying is very fascinated by stories that review the geopolitical complexity of global migration. She is a self-taught filmmaker, and she's based in DC, Vancouver now. Why don't we start with the first question? Ying, why did you make this film?
Oh, hi. Yeah, but first of all, I want to thank you for the real ability to invite this film. This is our premiere at the New York City. We actually feel extremely honored and also meaningful to be part of this festival. And also thanks for all the partners. And it's wonderful to connect with the mental health organization. Yeah, so I'm very excited to join this talk. Yeah. So your question is, why did I make this film? This project took us over 10 years to complete. So there's a difference from why we started and what motivated us to complete. When we first started this project, what triggered us is mysterious around the legal case. And also at that time, I just finished my first film about my sister's mental illness. She immigrated to the United States with my parents, and after the immigration, she developed severe eating disorders. So my first film was about her struggle with eating disorder, and by that time, mental health had already become a topic very close to my heart. So at the beginning, Shiming's mental struggle already surfaced. So I became also curious about his life and how he suffered from mental illness. So the legal part and also the Shiming's mental illness, that drew me into the story. But the whole process, we didn't foresee the process was this long. And this process actually give us a chance to learn deeper of Shiming's story, as well as give us the chance to get back to the root of the family story. And this is also a process for us to really learn the connection of immigration and mental illness, and also the consequence in that immigration legal system. So after this 10 years, almost like discoveries, we just feel so fascinated by all these new elements. And we feel this is such an important story, need to be told. And if we don't tell the story, nobody else would tell it. So I think that, that's why, that's motivated us to complete this project.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking back to our conversation over the weekend about like the dynamics in Chinese families and just the lack of culturally competent mental health services, right, in North America. So in Canada and also in the US. What do you hope the film can convey about these topics? About, just the mental health system, with Chinese families, immigration, all those stuff?
I think definitely one of the messages we want to convey through this film is that mental illness is such a complicated topic, and the culture and the family play a very important role in it. And there is a direct link between the act of migration and with someone's mental illness. So that's why we kept all these elements and all these multiple layers of the family in the film, because all these elements contributed to this family tragedy. So for example, in the film, the film showed the special dynamic in Chinese family, the expectation among the family members, and one person's struggle, as well as one person's shame, is the whole family's shame. And also the migrant, Shiming was the only child in the family, and he came to Canada first as an international student and then become a landed immigrant. So as a newcomer of a country, regardless actually how better your English might be, the cultural isolation, as well as the encounter of a new social system, and all this stress, to try to settle down in a new place, to navigate a completely different institutional system, all that put extreme stress on one person. And that was a big factor in one's, that big factor triggered to Shiming's psychosis symptom. So now the pandemic actually helped us to talk about mental illness in a more open way. However, I feel all this culture part should be included in this mainstream conversation and should be part of the consideration, understanding. And only with that understanding, we could develop more culturally competent prevention strategy as well as a treatment. So I think, this is one of the main messages we want to convey.
So I think like you mentioned, like having an English speaking audience view the film and then a Chinese speaking one, right? So what are some of the like family dynamics that you think it's pretty obvious for Chinese families, but not necessarily so for the English speaking audience members? Because I'm just trying to get more at the cultural piece.
I think one thing is, since the beginning throughout the film, whenever Shiming called home, and he always say, "I'm fine. Yeah, no worry about me." So this habit of you only share the good part of your life with your parents as well with others, and the tradition of not losing the faith, especially for a bright young man like Shiming, who has been considered bright and a good student, good kids. And now to losing the faith, now to show the weakness. And I think that's a big part of this family. And also in Chinese family, we tend to have a, not only with the child, we all have an expectation, from a wife and like mom, and then from the other generation. So the ripple effect in the Chinese family that goes very wide and very deep. That's also one part. And also is the Shiming Shiming grew up in the one-child generation, and he carried a special burden, special impact from the whole family. And I think that applied to many international students in the United States, in Canada, worldwide. So on the surface, they were model students in school, but underneath, a lot of them, they are struggling with all this burden, all this expectation, also the search for the meaning of life. I think that's all part of these elements that showed in the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just maybe for the audience member that might not be as familiar, China has a one-child policy, so you can only have one children, right? So I remember in the beginning of the film, you talk about how great Shiming's parents are, like a teacher, a scientist, and so there was so much hope, and so that's why he went to the US. And I'm also thinking about like the part where he keeps telling his parents, "I'm fine," right? Some of it's also to protect the family, right? Definitely there's a stigma and no one kind of knows about it. The grandma never found out that he died by suicide. I mean, thinking back to like the mental health system, do you think there could have been something that could have been done? Like what would have made the mental health system in Canada where he was more culturally competent or more humane for immigrants?
I think first of all, it's still back to the understanding of all these cultural elements that involved in one person's growing up and involved in the family. And also, I think the important is to understand the stress a migrant have to face in a new culture. As I mentioned before, the language part. So I also use myself as an example. I have been living here for quite a long time, but I came here after I passed my prime time in learning the language. So the struggle with the language would be the struggle for people like me for the whole life. And I think that definitely that add an important layer of of the stress, and also the different culture system, especially people from Asian countries. That the culture is so different from system of the Western culture, so the culture shock is even more bigger. So I think understanding of the culture element, understanding of what new immigrants have to face, and I think that's the foundation to really to build up more culture competent service.
So, given the rise in anti-immigrant sentiments and also just like anti-Asian hate incidents, right, in North America, how can the film be used to advocate for more culturally competent mental health services, or just more compassionate care?
Since later last year, so we launched an impact campaign along with the film, and we bring the film in the communities in Canada and showing the film, as well as we organized the panel discussion with experts working in the mental health, immigration, and the legal system, and to bring all parts of the community together to talk about the issues. Because I think all this anti-Asian, all this racism, I always feel it comes from ignorance. Ignorance lead to fear, fear lead to violence. So a film like this that can emotionally engaging audience and can tell a full story of a family, and instead of a message driven, like a one-sided media coverage or very fragmented social media. And I think that is so important because that can bridge the understanding, and also that can bring out the compassion. With the understanding and with the compassion, and I think that's can bring the change.
Okay. So it seems like a lot of it is when we have these anti-immigrant sentiments or these types of feelings, it's because we don't see the other as a fellow human being, you're saying, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think there's more stories like this need to be taught. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So 10 years is a long time, right? There's a lot of change that goes on. So with the parents, you follow the parents for 10 years. How have the parents' thoughts change, like in regards to their son's death or about Canada's immigration or court system, even their own experience growing up in China?
Yeah, so actually the whole process, what touched me most is to see the change of the parents. And I think first of all, their change, the attitude of the mental illness definitely changed. And at the beginning, they actually, it was very hard for them to really accept their son has a mental problem, has a psychosis. But later on, especially the father, what he always said is, if I could have known Shimi's mental illness earlier, I would give the support he need, and this tragedy may not happen. And also, I see the change of their, understanding of the Western culture, but I also see their change of understanding of their relationship with Shimi, because later down they always reflect and the way they brought up Shimi, because the parents grew up in the communist ideology. The whole idea they got is you have to work hard, you have to sacrifice yourself for country or for the party. But now, actually, later on, they really question that ideology they had, and also the ideology they put on their child. So I see the change of their relationship, and the mom, later on, the mom, start to really reflect on what really family mean to her, and ultimately, what's really mean, like the happiness, what's real meaning of the happiness for one's life. So yeah, so that's that part is really touched me deeply.
I'm just curious, what does happiness mean to the parents? Growing up also in a very, Chinese immigrant family, like happiness is not the first thing that your parents really care about, right? So like, I wonder, like, how do they think about happiness? And there was even a time during the movie when like it seemed like the mother was about to leave the husband and be like, no, I can't go back, I have to stay here, I just keep fighting. So yeah.
I think as the film showed later on, is that the reason the mom decided to go back and to let go of the fighting is she realized that if she didn't go back, the whole family she would lose the whole family. And also she realized that how much care Mr. Deng, the father, had given her. And then so later on, she told me that for the rest of her life, what she wanted to do is to really care about Mr. Deng, and so that they could live together happily. So actually, the original plan is after she went back China, we went to the Sichuan, the family town, with the parents together to have a happy family reunion in the father's village. That was the whole plan. So but we didn't expect that only 2 months after the mother went back, the father got a stroke. And then like it seems like the story continued, but it was not the so-called happy ending we planned. So then we had to take train to back to Sichuan on our own. But that was the original plan, is the parents would go back to the Sichuan and to visit the father's whole family. Yeah.
I love that you're saying that happy ending. And it's just interesting because at the end of the film, I don't know how to feel about it, because like there wasn't really a happy ending. Like it almost felt like life just went on. And I know that we're going to stop at 5:30 for audience Q&A, but I was just wondering, like, could you talk a little bit about how you changed in the 10 years of making this film?
Yeah, I think my hair from a black hair, yeah, changed to gray hair. That's a big change. I think definitely my understanding of mental illness, that's completely changed. And also my understanding of storytelling. The whole process was a big learning process for me, in terms of storytelling, in terms of learning the craft of making a film, and also what kind of film I want to make. And for me, I feel extremely rewarding and satisfied that this film didn't turn out to be a one message driven film. It turned out to be it's a touching family story. It's with so many layers that actually audience can take elements, whatever relate to them. And also because of this complexity, this film has gone beyond one family, beyond one culture, and has more universal touching. And I think that is, we feel extremely happy about.
So I'm going to pause really quickly to see if people have questions. If not, I'm going to keep on asking you questions.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, folks, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll be happy to bring you online or wave us down. We'll be happy to open up your mic. We'll be happy to read the question for you if you're not comfortable reading it yourself. Feel free to be a part of this as well. Lynn, I'll go back to you. You can, I think, ask another question.
Yeah, I should confess, I'm really nervous today. So I mean, yeah. So if some questions you feel the answer is not satisfied, you can ask the question again.
So like, this is more of like out of my curiosity, because I do a lot of the advocacy work and really like pushing for the families. I've been in the mental health system so long that I don't even know what would culturally competent mental health service be like. And just kind of reimagining just what would a culturally competent mental health system look like besides going, so there's an understanding, right? But like, what is so Eurocentric about our mental health system?
And first, I should say, I'm really not an expert. I'm just a filmmaker. But part of the process of making the film is that we actually reach out, interviewed over 20 experts working in the mental health, working in the immigration settlement, as well as immigration legal system. So what I can say here is what I learned from them, and also what I learned from on these panel discussions. I think one thing is, as I mentioned, like the role family played, because of the so-called Eurocentric system is tend to look at the patient as one person, individual, and the person has the will to make the decision, and he has a right to make their own decision. But from this film, you can see is a lot of times, especially as an immigrant who didn't have a resource about the mental wellness, all this information at the beginning, it's almost impossible for them first to admit they have the mental health problem because they basically have no knowledge, and their family doesn't have this knowledge. And then especially in the collective culture, Asian culture, the one person carries almost the whole burden of the whole family, you know, all this dynamic showed in the film, as I mentioned. And all that, if we talk about one person's problem, we have to take all that into consideration. And then third level is a lot of immigrants, like people from China or people from the countries that had the war or some very traumatic culture, historical events, say like Shimin came from the generation that also experienced the Tiananmen demonstration, right? The Chinese culture, the drastic change opened the war from the Cultural Revolution, opened the war. So all this very drastic culture and social change that also play a big role in people's understanding of themselves, their understanding of the culture, their understanding of a society. So I think that's an understanding part. And in terms of the prevention, then I think then that's the resource, like what kind of resource they could assess. Probably I think it's a similar case in the States, like in Canada, a lot of resource still in English language. Even some translated into the ethnic language, the terms they use is still directly translated from English, and the concept is English. And sometimes it's very hard to apply the concept directly into the culture, into the cultural language we use. And that would add another layer for us, for people who are suffering, to really understand what they are suffering. And then the treatment. So we got a chance to visit the transcultural psychiatry in the McGill University. So they have developed a system to help the treatment. So then the language, one thing is they recognize that the language, the important role of the mother tongue play in the treatment, because even people, as I mentioned, they can communicate in English. It's hard for them to communicate maybe about their problem or to communicate of their deeper feelings, emotions. So in the treatment, they always bring a translator who can not only speak the language, who can also understand the implications of the language, so that they can help the people to better communicate their suffering, and then help the professional who are doing the training can better understanding the whole circumstances the person is experiencing. So I think this is just some elements I learned from them about the culturally competent service.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we see also a lot, Ying and I was chatting, and we see a lot of commonalities in Canada and in like the States. Just the fact that it's not just merely a language piece, it's also the cultural concepts don't translate neatly. And I know there's a question for you in the chat that says, like, can you talk a little bit about how you build mystery in the film? Because like I remember the first 40 minutes, I was just like, what is going on? Like, right? So a little bit more of like the way you filmed and your artistic kind of decisions that you were making.
So the most challenging for us actually for this project is how to tell the story, because there's so many elements, there's so many ways to tell this story, and because originally the case already had a mystery, which is why the police buried him first, and whether it's a real suicide or it's something else. So when we started to structure the story, and we feel actually that the original mystery also become the organic starting point to build the suspense, then to help the audience gradually enter this world and step on the journey with the parents. So I think that's why we started the film in this way.
Okay.
And also based on my experience working with my younger sister and my experience making my first film, I always feel you know, without really get into the mind, the world of people suffering mental illness, it's really hard to really understand what they're going through. So that's why. And for Shiming's life was an area before the social media. So he only left a couple photos and a couple emails. So later on, I decided like I really want to bring Shiming's world to life, to really let the audience to experience what he experienced as a newcomer of the country and as a person who suffered from psychosis and as a person who really went through all this deportation procedure. So that's why, later on, we create all this reenactment. We're hiring the actors to play Shiming, to use a reenactment to bring the Shiming's world into life. And that word also add another layer of mystery and another layer of suspense. But I think that's part of the technique or part of we want to achieve through really telling the story in a more cinematic way.
Yeah. So you kind of already covered the next question, which is like, what is fictional and what is real, right? So it seems like the lawyer, the parents were all real. The flashbacks and the reenactment is Xiaoming, right? Which you hire a lawyer for.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So I think pretty
Also,
much the whole story was true, right?
What?
So the whole story was true, right? It's just I think it was more of a stylistic choice that you made.
Yes, I think definitely the whole story is true. But I think in terms of filmmaking, one of my hero is Werner Herzog, the famous documentary filmmaker. And he always asking what is fact, what's the difference of truth and facts. And I think truth is the ultimate truth. Sometimes you need fiction way to really achieve the ultimate truth, because there's a difference of ultimate truth, which in this film is one of the truths is Shiming's mental state, mental condition. So what is the ultimate truth and what is facts? And what we want to achieve in this film is we want to achieve the psychology and the mental and spiritual truth of a migrant, their experience in a new country.
We have a question here from Esther. Esther, can we bring you on the line to ask your question?
Hi, yeah. So from what I remember, my question is that Shiming did not seek help from the mental health system for his schizophrenia. And I know that seems to be the norm for immigrants, just help-seeking attitudes. And if that's the case, then regardless of how culturally competent, the mental health system becomes, there's gonna be some sort of disconnect. So what can we do about this? And what can those who aren't professionals, who aren't mental health professionals, just like the average person, what can we do to raise awareness, change the conversation, and kind of help bridge that cultural gap?
Okay, I think that's back to the resource, like what kind of a resource that people, new immigrant can access. So as I mentioned, in Canada, a lot of resource about mental illness is mainly still in English language. And for the sorry, I need to think a little bit more about language. So Lynn, do you have answers for that based on your surveys?
Yeah, I think like not seeking mental health services, there's a lot of different reasons, right? Yeah, there might be the psychosis, but there's also a lot of cultural and structural barriers, right? Where like, do they have access for healthcare, right? Like that is a very big deal. Does the clinician understand the language, right? And like, you know, how included does the family feel, right? I mean, like Xiaoming is a very particular case because he was there by himself, right? But you know, there were the system also failed him, right? Where they were obviously it was in his documents that he was in psychosis. There was some criminal, like he was in court, like he should not have been representing himself. I kind of felt like that was one thing where it was also the system that failed him. You know, there's all like I feel like there are still things that we have to do as a society and as like a mental health system to outreach to people, right? Because you know, in Chinese culture, there is stigma. There's also like a different understanding of what mental illness is and the treatment of it, right? And unless we normalize these conversations, there's no access, right? Because it's kind of like how many touches can you make? Because like not everyone will come to you, but like in what ways do you normalize the conversation and also like give people hope, right? If the idea is always like, oh, like having a mental illness is a death sentence, no one's going to go get help, right? But we now we know a lot more what we didn't know before. Like if it was the first psychosis and you intervene at that time, there's a very good chance that you know the outcome would be much better, and there is a possibility of going back to pre-psychosis kind of functioning. I don't know if that answered your question, Esther.
Ying, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, and I think the reach out, and also I want to also point out in Shimi's case, is that Shimi is actually a representative of international students. And in general, international students is a group of people who actually also even be more marginalized if we're talking about immigrants of all migrants, because they come here only on student visa, and like for the local community, they tend not to consider them as part of the community. So in terms of reaching out to them, or resource designed for them is even less. And I think it's so for them it's even hard for them to first understand all these issues. So I think the service provider from the host country, from the host place, how I think they actually play a big role. And they shouldn't put this burden on the people who come here. They need to outreach to them to understand what's the circumstances they are facing, and then to provide the more like a targeted, more relevant information for them. Because actually is what we discover is all these people facing is even if they admit they have a mental problem, then the next step is where to seek help, how to navigate the so complicated the service health service system is another big step, another question. So I think these are all parts of this, like how people seek help and how we can give help to people.
Thank you. Laura, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think, Ying, thank you so much for this beautiful movie. And Lynn, thank you for moderating this session. I think what you said about reaching out is absolutely right. And I think also maybe normalizing the seeking help among immigrants. You know, I didn't know until I saw your movie that there was a higher frequency of mental illness among immigrants. And it makes sense that there would be, because of the stress and not having your support system. And often people immigrate when they are young and don't have a lot of experience, you know, and if you layer on that, the cultural, you know, barriers for them to seek help and the logistics and how to navigate it. But I think to the extent that we can normalize it, and as the host country, there be somebody who can say, it's very stressful to immigrate, you know, we understand that there, you know, we'd like to encourage you to seek help, and maybe these are some places where you could seek it that might be useful.
Lynn, can you share your organization as a resource?
Yes, of course. Of course I could share. So we do a lot of this stuff where we do community education, educating the public about, the Chinese language. We did a lot of workshops on mental health, especially with the anti-Asian racism that's been happening. We did a lot of stuff on you know, how that could be traumatic, you know, and oftentimes when we talk about trauma, we think of like racial trauma. We don't really think about immigration as a traumatic experience in itself. And oftentimes this language of cultural competency is really, I've been thinking about it a lot, where it's really, it is racism, but like when we cloak it in language of diversity, inclusion, and culture, we kind of remove it from this kind of very Eurocentric, racist biomedical system that was not built for communities of color. Yeah, I'm sorry, that was a little bit ranting. But this is our organization. We run monthly groups in the Chinese language. And just a quick shout out to some of our volunteers, Leah and Jen, they're here.
Thank you. We are out of time, but this was really fascinating. Beautiful film. Ying, thank you so much for your film, and thank you for enlightening us. Lynn, thank you so much for leading this conversation, and thank you all for being a part of this. I'll remind you that next up at 7 p.m. is the Q&A for in a different key, and then tomorrow night is closing night. So please see the films now and join us for what's left. All of these films, all these conversations will also be available on our YouTube channel, so you could check those out as well. Thank you all, and we'll see you later tonight. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.